I never imagined my wife would humiliate me in front of 200 people at a black-tie charity event. "He's not man enough to get me pregnant," she announced from the stage, microphone in hand, champagne glass in the other. Her medical colleagues, people I'd shared dinners with, nodded knowingly. They'd all been talking about my condition behind my back for months. That night, I discovered just how deep betrayal can cut when it comes from the person who vowed to love you through sickness and health. But what nobody in that ballroom knew, not even my soon-to-be ex-wife, was that fate had a twist in store that would change everything. Sometimes I wonder if it's easier to just walk away when life slaps you in the face. But real men don't run from their problems. They face them head-on. That's what my old man always said. Now I'm not sure what he'd think about how things turned out. Maybe some situations you just can't fix, no matter how hard you try. Maybe some wounds cut too deep to heal. My name is Preston Harrison. I'm 45 years old. And until 3 years ago, I owned the most successful chain of supermarkets in Northern Virginia. I built that business from scratch, worked 80-hour weeks for over a decade until I had 5 locations across 3 counties. When I wasn't working, I was with Victoria, Vicky, as everyone called her. She was the smartest woman I'd ever met, a pediatrician who could calm a screaming baby with just a smile and a soft word. We met at a charity auction. I donated a year's worth of groceries to a family in need, and she was there representing her medical practice. She had this laugh that could light up a room, and when she looked at me, it felt like she actually saw me, not just my business or my wallet. From our first date, we talked about having kids. Vicky loved children. It wasn't just her job, it was her calling. She'd come home from the clinic with stories about her little patients, and I could see in her eyes how much she wanted family of her own. I wanted it too. I'd already built my business. Now I wanted to build something that would last beyond me. We got married at the lake house my grandfather left me. Nothing fancy, just close friends and family. Her father, a retired Army colonel, pulled me aside that day and said, "Take care of my little girl, son." That's all I asked. I promised him I would, and I meant it with every fiber of my being. The first year was perfect. We bought a house with a big backyard, painted a nursery in soft yellows and greens. Vicky would stand in that empty room sometimes, just imagining. I'd wrap my arms around her waist, and we'd dream together about the sounds of little feet running down the hallway. When she didn't get pregnant right away, we weren't worried. These things take time, everyone said. But time kept passing, and that empty nursery started to feel like a broken promise. After 2 years, Vicky's smile began to fade. The sparkle in her eyes dimmed a little more each month. "Maybe we should see someone," she finally said one night. I nodded, trying to hide my own worry. What if something was wrong with me? What kind of man can't give his wife a child? Little did I know, that doctor's appointment would be the beginning of the end for us. Not because of what they found, but because of what it would reveal about both of us when pushed to our breaking points. The waiting room at the fertility clinic looked like any other doctor's office. Bland artwork on the walls, outdated magazines on the tables, the faint smell of disinfectant hanging in the air. But it felt different. The tension was palpable. Couples sat apart from each other, not making eye contact with anyone else. Everyone united by the same unspoken pain. Vicky gripped my hand, so tight her knuckles turned white. As a doctor herself, she'd been putting on a brave face, rattling off statistics and treatment options like she was discussing someone else's case. But I knew her well enough to see through it. This was breaking her too. "Harrison," the nurse called. We followed her down a sterile hallway to a small office, where Dr. Patel waited with a folder on his desk. One thin folder that somehow held the weight of our entire future. "Please sit down," he said, his voice gentle in a way that immediately made my stomach drop. Good news doesn't need that kind of gentleness. He opened the folder and looked at us both. "I have your test results here." The next few minutes became a blur of medical terminology. All I could focus on was Vicky's hand in mine, growing colder by the second. Then 3 words cut through the fog. Severely low count. The doctor was looking at me now. "Mr. Harrison, your sperm count is significantly below what we consider necessary for natural conception. The motility is also compromised." I felt the room tilt slightly. What does that mean exactly? I heard myself ask, my voice sounding distant. "It means pregnancy would be extremely unlikely without medical intervention," he said, his eyes full of practiced sympathy. Not impossible, but very challenging. Vicky, ever the professional, started asking questions about treatments, success rates, medications. I just sat there, feeling like someone had knocked the wind out of me. This was my fault. All those months of disappointment, all those tears Vicky had tried to hide from me. Because of me, the drive home was silent. I kept both hands on the wheel, staring straight ahead, afraid to look at my wife, afraid of what I might see in her eyes. That night, after Vicky had gone to bed, I sat alone in our kitchen with a bottle of whiskey. I didn't get drunk. That would have been too easy. Instead, I just sat there, turning the glass in my hands, trying to wrap my head around the new reality. My phone buzzed with a text from Shane, my buddy from college who now worked as a flight attendant. "How'd it go today, man?" I stared at the message for a long time before responding. "Not good. Problems with me." His reply came quickly. "Shit, Preston. I'm sorry. Want me to come over?" "Nah. Need some time." What I didn't tell him was that I couldn't bear to see anyone right now. Couldn't bear the pity, the awkward reassurances. I'd spent my entire life being the guy who fixed things, who made things happen. I'd built a business from nothing, provided a good life for us. But this I couldn't fix with hard work or determination. The next morning, I woke up early and went for a run, pushing myself until my lungs burned and my legs wobbled. Physical pain was easier to deal with than whatever was happening in my chest. When I got home, sweaty and exhausted, Vicky was sitting at the kitchen counter, still in her pajamas, staring at her tablet. "Hey," I said, grabbing a bottle of water from the fridge. She looked up, and for a second, I saw something flicker across her face. Disappointment? Resentment? But then it was gone, replaced by that professional smile she'd been wearing more and more lately. "I've been researching treatments," she said, turning the tablet toward me. "There are options, Preston." I nodded, trying to match her practical approach. "Whatever you want to try, I'm all in. Money's no object." She reached for my hand, but it felt like a doctor comforting a patient rather than a wife connecting with her husband. "We'll get through this," she said, but her eyes didn't quite meet mine. What I didn't know then was that we wouldn't get through it, at least not together. That moment in the kitchen was the beginning of a slow, painful unraveling that neither of us saw coming. The treatment started immediately. Vicky approached it like any medical challenge. Research, consultations, second opinions. We tried everything. Hormones, dietary changes, acupuncture. I cut out alcohol, started taking cold showers, swallowed handfuls of supplements each morning. If someone had told me standing on my head would help, I'd have done it. For 3 months, our lives revolved around doctor appointments and scheduled sex. The romance was gone, replaced by clinical precision and desperate hope. I watched Vicky transform from my loving wife into a woman obsessed. She tracked everything on spreadsheets and apps, turning our marriage into a science experiment. Meanwhile, business was booming. I just opened our 6th store, and the investors were clamoring for more. The irony wasn't lost on me. Professionally, I was more successful than ever. Personally, I was failing at the one thing that mattered most. One evening, I arrived home late after dealing with a refrigeration issue at the new store. The house was dark except for the blue light of Vicky's laptop in the kitchen. "Sorry I'm late," I said, setting down my keys. "Did you eat?" Vicky didn't look up from her screen. "It's Tuesday." I stared at her blankly. She finally met my eyes, frustration etched across her face. "It's Tuesday, Preston. I've been tracking this cycle for weeks. Tonight was supposed to be. We were supposed to. Shit, Vic, I'm sorry. The new store had an emergency and. An emergency? Her laugh was sharp, unfamiliar. "We're trying to create a family here, and you forgot because of a broken freezer." I reached for her hand, but she pulled away. "I didn't forget. I just lost track of." "You lost track," she repeated, her voice flat. "Story of our lives lately." The comment stung more than it should have. "That's not fair. I'm trying here. I'm doing everything the doctor suggested." "Are you?" She closed her laptop with a snap. "Because sometimes it feels like I'm the only one who really wants this." The accusation hung between us, ugly and unexpected. Of course I wanted children. I'd always wanted them. But standing there, watching my wife look at me like I was a stranger, I wondered if wanting them this way, at this cost, was worth it. Before I could respond, Vicky's phone rang. It was the hospital. One of her patients had been admitted with a high fever. She grabbed her purse without another word, leaving me alone in our silent house. I opened a beer, to hell with the fertility diet, and wandered into her home office. Vicky's desk was meticulously organized as always, color-coded files neatly stacked. Mine was cluttered with invoices and store reports. Two different people, two different worlds, gradually growing further apart. My eye caught a brochure half hidden beneath a medical journal, donor options for infertile couples. My stomach clenched. We hadn't discussed this yet. Using another man's. I couldn't even finish the thought. I slammed the brochure back on the desk. That night, I slept in the guest room for the first time. When Vicky came home, she didn't come looking for me. The empty space between us was growing, filling with unspoken resentments and disappointments neither of us knew how to navigate. 6 months after the diagnosis, Vicky landed a huge opportunity. Chief of Pediatrics at Richmond Memorial, the largest hospital in the county. Under normal circumstances, we would have celebrated, popped champagne, made love all night. Instead, I brought home flowers that wilted on the counter for days before I threw them out myself. "Aren't you excited?" I asked, watching her methodically sort through emails on her iPad, barely acknowledging my presence. "Of course I am," she replied without looking up. "It's what I've worked for." "Then let's celebrate. Let's go to Antonio's, get that corner table you love." She finally glanced at me, her expression unreadable. "I can't tonight. I need to prep for tomorrow's meeting with the board." It was always something. Work, appointments, conferences. The truth was, being around each other had become painful, a constant reminder of what we couldn't have. The fertility treatments had failed one after another, each defeat driving another wedge between us. Meanwhile, the hospital started featuring Vicky in their promotional materials. Her face appeared on billboards around town, smiling with a cherubic toddler on her lap. "Trusted care for your most precious gift," the tagline read. The irony wasn't lost on me. One evening, after another silent dinner, I tried again. "I was thinking we could get away this weekend. Hit the coast, stay at that B&B you liked last year." Vicky sighed, the sound heavy with impatience. "I told you yesterday, I'm speaking at a conference in Boston this weekend. Are you even listening to me anymore?" "You never mentioned any conference," I said, though honestly, I couldn't be sure. "We'd stopped really talking weeks ago." "Classic Preston," she muttered, clearing her plate. "Your head's always in the clouds these days." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," she said, turning to face me, "that you've checked out. The treatments don't work, so you've thrown in the towel. Meanwhile, I'm still fighting for us, for our future." I felt my temper flare. "Fighting for us? You're never even home. When's the last time we had a real conversation that wasn't about your damn ovulation chart or my sperm count?" "Oh, I'm sorry," she shot back, voice dripping with sarcasm. "Am I not making you feel manly enough? Poor baby. Try carrying around the knowledge that your biological clock is ticking like a time bomb while your husband mopes around feeling sorry for himself." Her words hit like a sucker punch. I stood there, speechless, as she stormed upstairs. The slam of our bedroom door echoed through the empty house. That night, I slept on the couch, staring at the ceiling until dawn broke. The distance between us seemed as vast as the Grand Canyon, and I was fresh out of Bridges. When I left for work the next morning, Vicky was already gone. On the kitchen counter sat a note. "Gone to Boston. Back Sunday. No love you. No miss you." Just cold information, like a memo between colleagues. I crumpled the note and tossed in the trash. If Vicky wanted to play it cool, two could tango. I've been killing myself trying to fix something that maybe couldn't be fixed. Maybe it was time to face facts. We were drifting apart, and neither of us had the energy to row back to shore. Little did I know, the real storm hadn't even hit yet. And when it did, it would sweep away every last illusion I had about my marriage. While Vicky was in Boston, I threw myself into work. The new store in Fairfax needed my attention. Staffing issues, supply chain problems, the usual headaches. I welcomed the distraction. Better to worry about inventory than about the wreckage of my marriage. Saturday night, Shane texted me. "Drowning your sorrows solo? Not on my watch. Crashing at your place tonight. Flight got canceled. Be there in an hour." Having my oldest friend show up was exactly what I needed. We grilled steaks, cracked beers, and talked about everything except my marriage. It felt normal, like the old days before everything went sideways. Around midnight, Shane asked the question I'd been dreading. Level with me, Preston. How bad is it with you and Vicky? I took a long pull of my beer. Remember that sinking boat we tried to save at the lake house? That bad? Jesus, he muttered. Have you tried counseling? I let out a bitter laugh. She doesn't have time. Too busy saving other people's kids while resenting me for not being able to give her our own. Shane winced. That's rough, buddy. But you can't blame her for being hurt. I don't blame her for being hurt. I snapped. I blame her for punishing me. Like I chose this. Like I'm not hurting too. Before Shane could respond, my phone buzzed. A text from Carla, Vicky's sister. Call me ASAP. My stomach dropped. Carla never contacted me directly unless something was wrong. I stepped onto the porch and dialed her number, my heart racing. Preston. Carla's voice was tight. Where are you? At home. What's wrong? Is Vicky okay? There was a pause, then. She's physically fine. But, are you sitting down? Just spit it out, Carla. Vicky's not at a medical conference. She's at a fertility clinic in Boston. She's doing an insemination procedure. With donor sperm. The world tilted under my feet. What? I thought you knew. Carla continued, voice small. She told me you were on board with it. But then I saw her post on social media about being in Boston alone, and something felt off, so I called her and... Preston, I'm so sorry. I hung up without another word. My wife was in another state, trying to get pregnant with another man's child. Without telling me. Without asking me. The betrayal was so profound, so complete, I couldn't even process it. When Shane found me, I was sitting on the porch steps, staring into the darkness. What happened? He asked, alarmed by my expression. I told him, the words tasting like poison. When I finished, he let out a string of curses that summed up my feelings precisely. What are you going to do? He finally asked. I looked at him, suddenly clear-headed. I'm going to pack her things while she's gone. And when she gets back, I'm going to ask her one question. What question? Whether she ever loved me at all, or if I was just a means to an end, a potential father for the children she wanted. I didn't know it then, but the answer would come sooner and more brutally than I could have imagined. Vicky returned from Boston Sunday night, walking into a house where suitcases were already packed and waiting by the door. The look on her face when she saw them, shock melting into understanding, then hardening into defiance, told me everything I needed to know about our marriage. Carla called you, she said. Not a question. You're damn right she did. My voice was steady, calmer than I felt. Were you ever going to tell me? Or just wait until you were pregnant with another man's child and present it as a miracle? Vicky's chin lifted. I was going to tell you when I got back. I wanted to be sure it worked first. That's not how marriage works, Vicky. You don't make unilateral decisions about our family. Our family. She laughed, the sound like breaking glass. We don't have a family, Preston. We never will, because of you. The words hit like a physical blow. Because of a medical condition I have no control over, I said through clenched teeth. A condition I've been killing myself, trying to treat. For us. And it hasn't worked, she shot back. I'm 41, Preston. My time is running out. What did you expect me to do? Just give up on being a mother, because your ego can't handle using a donor? I stared at the stranger wearing my wife's face. I expected you to discuss it with me. To make the decision together. I tried. For months, I've tried bringing up alternatives. You shut down every time. She wasn't entirely wrong. The thought of another man fathering my child had been too much to bear. But to go behind my back. You need to leave, I said quietly. This is my house too, she protested. I shook my head. Not anymore. Not after this. 2 days later, we attended the annual hospital fundraiser, separately. I went to support my store's donation to the pediatric wing, an obligation I couldn't duck. Vicky was being honored for her work. The event was at the Westin downtown, all crystal chandeliers and black ties. I stayed at the bar, nursing a scotch, nodding at acquaintances while avoiding actual conversation. Then I saw Vicky across the room, radiant in a blue dress, surrounded by admirers. Our eyes met briefly before she looked away. The cut was so clean it almost didn't hurt. Until I overheard a conversation that changed everything. I wasn't planning to stay long at the fundraiser, just enough to make an appearance, shake the right hands, maybe write another check. But as I sipped my scotch near the bar, I couldn't help watching Vicky work the room, radiant in her blue dress, surrounded by admirers. Dr. Miller, the hospital's chief of surgery, approached me with a sympathetic smile that immediately set my teeth on edge. "Preston, good to see you. Hanging in there." "I'm fine," I said curtly, not inviting further conversation. He nodded, looking uncomfortable. "Listen, for what it's worth, I think Victoria's being a bit hasty with her decisions. But women and their biological clocks, you know." I stiffened. "What decisions are you referring to?" His eyes widened slightly. "The procedure in Boston. I assumed you knew." Before I could respond, the hospital director tapped the microphone, calling for attention. "Tonight, we honor Dr. Victoria Harrison for her extraordinary contributions to pediatric care." I stood frozen, watching Vicky make her way to the stage, poised and professional. My mind was racing. How many people knew about our private struggles? "Thank you all," Vicky began, smiling that practiced smile I once loved. "Children have always been my passion, both professionally and personally." A few knowing glances were exchanged in the audience. My stomach churned. "I've faced obstacles in my journey," she continued, "but I've learned that sometimes you have to take matters into your own hands to create the future you want." More nods, more knowing looks. The rage building inside me was like nothing I'd ever experienced. From the back, someone called out, "Any updates on the Boston procedure, Victoria?" The room went quiet. Vicky's eyes found mine in the crowd, and she faltered slightly. There was a moment, one brief moment, where I thought she might show discretion. Instead, a strange determination crossed her face. "Well," she said with a forced laugh, "when your husband isn't man enough to get the job done, sometimes you need medical intervention." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some nervous laughter. Someone whispered, "Did she really just say that?" Vicky seemed to realize she'd crossed a line, but doubled down. "I'm sorry, but it's true. What was I supposed to do? I'm married to a man who physically can't give me children. Preston's just not man enough to make me pregnant." The words echoed in the sudden silence. I felt every eye in the room turn to me, expressions ranging from shock to pity to morbid curiosity. In that moment, I understood that our marriage was truly over. Not because of my medical condition, not even because she'd gone behind my back with the donor sperm, but because she'd deliberately chosen to humiliate me publicly, to violate the most intimate trust between partners. When the stunned silence broke and the murmuring began, I simply set down my glass and walked toward the exit, back straight, eyes forward. I heard Vicky call my name, but I didn't turn. There was nothing left to say. I walked out without looking back, dignity intact but heart shattered beyond repair. In that moment, I finally accepted that some things can't be fixed, and some betrayals can never be forgiven. 3 months after the fundraiser disaster, I was living in a condo downtown, divorce papers signed, assets divided. The stores were mine, the house was hers. Clean break, as these things go. My attorney called it amicable. What a joke. There was nothing amicable about the end of a 12-year marriage, about discovering the person you trusted most had betrayed you in the most fundamental way. Shane convinced me to get away for a while. He was flying to Phoenix and had a spare buddy pass. Change of scenery, he insisted. Get her head straight. I hadn't been on a real vacation in years. Vicky always had conferences, or we were timing treatments. Now, I answered to no one. The freedom felt strange, like a new suit that didn't quite fit yet. Arizona in October was perfect. Warm days, cool nights, big skies stretching forever. I hiked Camelback Mountain, ate at restaurants without checking my phone, slept in. For the first time in years, I breathed without the weight of failure pressing on my chest. On my last night, Shane got called for an emergency flight. "You'll be okay, Solo?" he asked, tossing clothes into his crew bag. "I'm a big boy," I assured him. "Go save the day." I ended up at the resort bar, nursing a bourbon, watching the sunset paint the desert gold. The bartender, Grace according to her name tag, had a quick smile and an easy laugh. "Just passing through?" she asked, sliding a bowl of mixed nuts my way. "Last night," I replied. "Back to reality tomorrow." "Reality's overrated," she said with a wink. We talked as she worked. Nothing deep, just pleasant conversation. She was a teacher taking night shifts to pay off student loans. Loved books, hated politics, had strong opinions about baseball teams. When her shift ended, she hesitated before asking, "Want to take a walk? There's a great view of the stars from the upper trail." Any other time in my life, I would have declined. I was nobody's rebound guy. But something in her straightforward manner made me nod. Under the desert stars, we talked about real things. Her divorce 2 years ago, my fresh wounds still healing. No pressure, no expectations. Just two adults connecting in the vast Arizona night. I'm moving east, she mentioned casually. Got a teaching job in Virginia next semester. I looked at her. Coincidence tingling at the back of my neck. Virginia. Richmond area, she confirmed. That's where I live, I said, the words hanging between us like possibility. Grace smiled. Well, isn't that something? Back home a week later, I still couldn't shake the memory of that night. For the first time since everything fell apart, I felt something stir inside me. Not hope exactly. I wasn't ready for that yet, but something close. Something like a future. 6 months after meeting Grace in Arizona, we'd been dating long distance. She'd moved to Richmond as planned, teaching 3rd grade at a private school 20 minutes from my condo. We took things slow, weekend trips, long phone calls, no pressure. Both carrying baggage from failed marriages. Neither of us wanted to rush. One Friday evening, I was closing up the West Side store when my phone buzzed with a text from Shane. Dude, you might want to sit down for this. Call me. What's up? I asked when he answered. You haven't seen the news? Victoria's pregnant. The words hit me like a physical blow. I sank onto a nearby chair, my mind racing. The procedure in Boston had worked, then. She was having another man's child. The child she couldn't have with me. You okay? Shane asked after my extended silence. Yeah, I replied, surprised to find it was mostly true. It's weird, but I'm okay. Later that night, over dinner with Grace, I found myself distracted, turning the news over in my mind. Earth to Preston, Grace said, waving her hand in front of my face. Where'd you go? I hesitated, then told her about Vicky's pregnancy. To my surprise, Grace didn't offer platitudes or change the subject. She just listened. How do you feel about it? She asked when I finished. Honestly, relieved, I admitted. If the treatment worked right away, she might have blindsided me with a pregnancy while we were still together. At least this way, it's cleaner. Grace nodded thoughtfully. You know what I think? I think someday you'll be a great father, if that's still what you want. The confidence in her voice caught me off guard. The doctor said. Doctors say a lot of things, she interrupted. My sister was told she'd never conceive. She has 3 kids now. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to consider the possibility, not as a desperate need, but as a future that might still be open to me. The following week, I made an appointment with a new specialist, not out of urgency, but curiosity. Dr. Patel had retired, and his replacement, Dr. Sharma, had a different approach. Mr. Harrison, she said, reviewing my chart, has anyone discussed variations in sperm count over time with you? What do you mean? Sperm production isn't static. It can change significantly based on numerous factors: stress, diet, environmental exposures. Even age sometimes works in your favor after the initial diagnosis. She recommended new tests, a different protocol. No guarantees, but possibilities. Driving home, I felt lighter somehow. Not because I suddenly needed to be a father, but because I realized I'd been carrying the weight of absolute certainty about my limitations. Maybe life was more fluid than that. Maybe second chances came in unexpected ways. 2 years after the night my marriage ended, I stood in the nursery of my new home, watching Grace hang a mobile over the crib. The room was painted soft green, with animals marching along the border, much like the nursery Vicky and I had prepared years ago, but this time filled with real hope instead of desperation. Think he'll like it? Grace asked, stepping back to admire her work. I wrapped my arms around her expanding belly. He'll love it. Another month, and we'll find out for sure. The journey here had been anything but direct. After Dr. Sharma suggested new tests, I discovered my sperm count had indeed improved. Not dramatically, but enough to make natural conception possible, if unlikely. Grace and I had decided not to fixate on it, to let nature take its course while we build our relationship on more than just the possibility of children. 6 months into our marriage, the pregnancy test came back positive. I still remember staring at it, disbelief warring with joy, afraid to believe it was real. What are you thinking about? Grace asked now, turning in my arms. How life has a way of coming full circle, I replied. 5 years ago, I thought my chance at fatherhood was over. Now here we are. Later that evening, as we walked through the neighborhood, we ran into our new neighbor, a nurse from Richmond Memorial. She recognized me immediately. "Mr. Harrison, I didn't realize you lived here." Her eyes darted to Grace's belly, then back to my face. "Congratulations to you both." "Thank you," I said, genuinely meaning it. After she continued on her way, Grace squeezed my hand. "You okay? I know running into hospital staff can be awkward." I considered the question. There had been a time when encounters like this would have triggered anger, memories of Vicky's betrayal burning fresh. But now, the past felt distant, belonging to a different life. "I'm good," I said, realizing it was completely true. Actually, I'm better than good. I'd heard through mutual friends that Vicky had given birth to a healthy baby girl and was now chief of pediatrics at a prestigious hospital in Boston. Once, that knowledge would have twisted like a knife. Now, I wished her well. Life's strange that way. The thing that breaks you isn't necessarily what defines you. It's what you build afterward that matters. Standing there with Grace, our son growing between us, I felt profound gratitude for the breakdown that had ultimately led to this breakthrough. Sometimes, the end is just the beginning you never saw coming.